My name is Riley Okeefe, and I'm a project manager at GreenLite. My day-to-day responsibilities include calling jurisdictions, pushing permits and reviews along, working collaboratively with teammates to solve problems internally and externally, and also a lot of client-facing. Whether it's giving them the peace of mind that the permits they're looking for us to produce are being handled, being pushed along, whether it's helping them out with questions they may have that's not necessarily permit related, but we have expertise that we can provide to answer these problems for them. As a project manager, while it can vary greatly, I boil it down to a lot of relationship management. Whether that is with a jurisdiction, forming these kinds of relationships with reviewers and building officials. So not only the first time we go in, but the next time we have that understanding of the GreenLite quality of work we're providing to them. Whether it's relationship management with clients specifically, making sure that they trust us, we're doing a great job for them, and keeping them overly updated sometimes. The biggest problem that we've seen is not giving clients enough updates. So I would rather over-inundate them and have them call me annoying than have them ever wondering where we are in the process with a permit, with a project, or whatever they've entrusted with us. Regardless of who it is, I'm instilling in them the faith that we can get this job done. Not only can we get it done, we're gonna get it done better than anyone else you've worked with before. And that's kind of the GreenLite promise. We promise efficiency, high quality of work, and we're going to deliver on that. So I talk to clients most day, every day, and that's the main goal when I speak with them, is developing that trust, that relationship, and making sure that when they see the GreenLite logo, they know exactly what they're expecting. Being nice gets permits approved is kind of a simplistic way of saying being kind to people gets you further in life. And I don't use it as a way to get further, but if you're kind to people, people are going to be kind to you back. Especially with a lot of these building officials and reviewers, all day people are screaming at them. They're screaming about, their bosses are like, why isn't this done fast enough? Contractors are calling, being like, where's my permit? All they do is just get screamed at and demeaned and whatever all day. So if you can just talk to someone like a real human being, not someone who's your enemy, they're working with you on this. They're not sitting there being like, how can I make this more difficult? That's not their job. It would make their job harder. Just being real with people gets you a long way. And being kind is just how I try to operate through life. So I push that through in my personal life, in my professional life. And people are a lot more willing to work with you if you're actually nice to them. We had this project in Texas. Now, what happened was construction was started a little bit before the permit was issued. The city found out, and we weren't aware of that at the time, but the city reached out to me, to inform the client and the construction team that they know this is happening, and they were in the process of taking further steps, not just telling them to stop, a stop work order which has fees assigned to it and everything like that. I spoke with the city, I spoke with the reviewers that I talked to previously when we got this permit in. And what ended up happening is just a blanket, okay, don't do that. So, we got that permit issued approximately a week later, and that was the only thing associated with it. So the client was very appreciative that, we stepped in to save them money on a mistake that, they didn't tell them to go start early. The contractor just wanted to jump on it, and everyone has a schedule, I totally get it, but the client was very happy with how we resolved that for him. Yeah, so what city reviewers, from my experience, deal with on a day-to-day basis are, too many projects, not enough staff, and short deadlines. So they're under the gun of pressure all day by not just internally from their own bosses, but everyone who wants their permit now. So they get frequent calls from anyone, whether it's a client, a contractor, another type of expediting firm. And the tone of these calls is negative. People call them screaming, not understanding that these people have their own workload. And I find that if you can get through the noise and be just a kind person in these type of situations, you really stand out. They're not going to remember the people who scream at them because they get too many. What they're going to remember are the people who treat them with dignity as they should as another human being. And that's the GreenLite kind of way of going about things. I handle other people's stress and worry about timelines and projects with clear expectations. I would rather immediately tell a client that their timeline is not going to be met than try to string them along and give them a good, we're doing our best. We're going to get everything as fast as possible and try to make this deadline. I would rather expectations set with them immediately. Whether the timeline is feasible or not, we are going to do it as fast as we can. So a day when things aren't going smoothly starts almost the same way every time. It's a client wanting to know where things are because they have an internal deadline that has not been conveyed to us. We've encountered that quite a few times, which is why we try to expectations set up front and get their construction start dates, their anticipated permit issuance dates, so we can be aware of their timeline as well. Now, my first plan of action when I get a call, an email from somebody requesting this, is to go straight into where are we at in this process. Have we submitted? Where's this review at? Can I call the city and ask what their timeline expectation is? If it's internal and our team is still reviewing it, when can we get those comments back out to them? What I don't like to do is reach out to a client without an answer. So I always do this background research so I can come to them and answer their problem instead of being like, oh, yeah, let me get back to you on that. And I find that helpful in jurisdictions too. You know, let's say we've resubmitted and we get a bunch of comments. You know, our review team does a fantastic job of not just proposing solutions and going to the design team and saying, hey, here's what we think will work if you just revise these plans, fill out these forms. You know, we're pretty sure this is going to get answered. What they do is go a step above and meet with all of these reviewers, and they pre-approve their responses. So we can confidently go to the team and say, if you do XYZ, ABC, you're going to get this permit approved the next round. If myself or the GreenLite team wasn't involved in one of those hectic situations, the way I see things going is a big blow up. And by that, I mean, you know, when a client is looking for an answer, they're being asked for an answer by someone above them. And if they can't get that answer, they're the target. You know, it all flows downhill to who can provide this solution. Now, if a client who doesn't have this experience, if it's a contractor who doesn't have this type of experience to answer these questions that a jurisdiction's asking, you know, sufficiently, then it becomes a bigger problem. And if there's no answer, then the problem doesn't get resolved. It's internal turmoil, which is what GreenLite comes in and prevents. You know, I've been told before we're kind of like a TSA PreCheck for permits. So imagine going to the airport, you know, it's Christmas Eve, there's 300 people at Newark, and you're stuck in a 3-hour line, your flight leaves in 2 hours. That's kind of what we do. We get you there with an hour spare. Having been on the engineering side of this, permitting is always difficult. It's always going to be difficult. Our job is finding a solution to making it less difficult, which is a lot easier said than done. Now, in my experience, it hasn't been about changing the way we get things permitted. It's about following the legislation and the rules in front of us. What GreenLite is doing and why I believe in it so much is we're not following the rules, we're changing the way things are done. We're going above and beyond instituting legislation and pushing that forward. So we're not following the rules before because there's only so many ways to go about the same thing given if you're in this box, right? GreenLite's opening the box and creating new avenues, faster avenues, and more efficient avenues to get these permits done. GreenLite's different than where I worked before, specifically with how we approach permitting. At my previous jobs in my previous career, permitting is viewed as a roadblock. It always has been and it always will be. But the idea there is to just get in, receive as many comments as you can, hope everything's resolved, and then resubmit, and it's this arduous process that seemingly never ends. Now, GreenLite, what we do is the preparation is a lot different. We go in with a solid plan set, a solid understanding of what's being asked of us, and can almost always guarantee that we're going to go in more prepared than someone who isn't using GreenLite. And it also goes into the fact that GreenLite is changing the way permitting is done. You know, at my old career, previous job, you follow a linear line in terms of permitting, especially with like state level permitting for large infrastructure projects. It's a lot of requirements, it's very specific, and a lot of it is left up to the interpretation of the reviewer. The extra steps we take here in getting these personal relationships with the reviewers, so we can go to them before we even go to the jurisdiction if we need to, and if we've worked them before, and say, hey, here's the scope of the project, here's what we were looking at. Is there anything that you've seen recently that has been popping up in a lot of your comments that we can just address before we even go into you? It's the preparation here that really makes a difference. GreenLite's culture is really impactful to how I do my job, and I think it's due to the collaboration of everyone in this company. It's my first time working with a review team as a non-engineer. The expertise that they bring in specifically into architecture with it, which is out of my forte as a former civil engineer, has changed the way I approach things and think about things in an engineering sense. So the culture here is something really special, and I think, the product that we're selling, the permits that we're getting are fantastic, but I think the thing that will make GreenLite what it will be are the people. One of our projects in Texas. Now, we had received comments, very, very hyper-specific comments to lighting, like lighting, the luminosity of it, and very specific stuff that was outside of my wheelhouse. What ended up happening is our review lead not only went to the jurisdiction to get clarity on this comment, because it was a very odd comment to receive on this specific scope. He went to the jurisdiction, got it clarified, did his own research, and before going back to the client with it, suggested lighting fixtures that they'd used in separate projects with us as a way to fix this. He didn't just say, hey, you need to go select a lighting fixture that kind of meets ABC per the jurisdiction. We confirmed that's what they're asking for, so good luck. What he did is said, hey, they're asking for this. In this other project, you propose this and use this. Is there any way you can incorporate that into this one and resolve this comment? And that actually bought in one of the design teams that we were working with. I could see the way they interacted with us change right after that. They go, they finally understood the value we bring. They're like, oh, so they're not just here to kind of expedite this permit. They're here to make everything easier. Our jobs as the design team, the client's job of being able to tell their boss everything's going smoothly. They're here for all of it. I chose GreenLite because it's different. Coming from an engineering consulting background, things have been done the same for a long time. The biggest innovation they've had is going from pencils to computers. I chose GreenLite because I want to be a part of something different and new.